Okay, so welcome, Minnie. If you want to go ahead and take a moment to introduce yourself, we are so excited to have you here today. And I'm going to let you take a few moments to give the who is Minnie, uh, who is Minnie?
Who is Minnie?
Who is Minnie?
Who is she? So I'm Minnie Bliesner. I go by she, they pronouns. I am a Coast Salish Lakhtamish woman. That's like the Lummi tribe by Bellingham, Washington. And I'm also a mother, creator, influencer, and educator. I have lived in Washington for almost all my life. I moved around quite a bit to Arizona, New Mexico, Oregon, and then I moved to Washington with a family guardian, and I aged out of care here in Washington. I'm also heavily involved with the LGBTQ plus community as I identify as pansexual.
Mhm.
And for folks that don't know what that is, it's a sexual orientation, but um, I'm not limited to anyone in regards of sexual or biological sex, gender, or gender identity. So romantically, I'm attracted to everyone, which is where the word pan from pansexual comes from. It's driven from a Latin word meaning every. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. And thank you so much for like taking the time to be like, this is who I am first and foremost, apart from like my sexual orientation.
Yeah.
Like I am also all of these other things. And yeah, I really appreciate you being able to give us kind of the whole picture. And for folks who don't know, I first met Minnie back in 20, I can't, was it 2019?
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's about right.
so many moons ago. And the first time I think I saw you was at the either Saying It Out Loud conference, or you were giving kind of a presentation to folks about EQ in Spokane. And I
Mhm.
just remember just being like, Minnie is driving it home. Like Minnie is saying what she needs to say, and they're just doing like such an amazing job at it. And I'm wondering if you can just like talk a little bit about like what your experience has been like being involved with like equality or like working in the LGBTQ space, and then like kind of the impact that has had on you.
Yeah, so it started with me. I was actually working for a different organization, and I remember being asked to go to it wasn't a conference, but just like some meeting where I was given a survey. And I think that's where like these surveys just started.
Yeah.
And answered it, whatever, gave it back. And then after a couple months of that going by, I realized that CCYJ was like creating this curriculum. And then I had some folks at CCYJ wanting to get me involved. I didn't really know what I was getting involved with, honestly. And it kind of just started from there, and then it just kept going and going and getting bigger. And it was so cool to see that impact and see folks actually really want to like uh, make it what it is, because they were like going out and getting data, doing these surveys, like researching, like doing anything and everything they could to get ahead of it, because you could see that impact for those youth and those young adults, like especially those who are like transitioning into adulthood, right? I think that was the biggest influence for me, because going into adulthood was my hardest time, like trying to understand my identity as well as also just trying to survive every day was like the biggest hump that I had to get past.
Yeah, 100%. And were you on the east side of the mountains when that happened?
No, I was here in
Oh,
Spokane.
you were here. Oh, okay. So you were in Spokane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think you are like really talking about something that is just like so incredibly important. It's like this cusp of like when we're in foster care and then like suddenly we're not, and then we have to like figure this out on our own, and we're like, "Oh, would have been really nice to have resources.
Mhm.
Right. And I just like really appreciate you kind of highlighting that a little bit. But I think one of the other things that I'm like hearing you say too is that you were kind of involved with the formation of equality from the very beginning. And so
Mhm.
you've been around for a while now. And so I guess I'm just a little bit curious, like, you know, what do you feel like one of the greatest achievements has been for the equality um, program since you've been able to see it from like the beginning until its expansion now, right? Like,
Yeah. I think one of the biggest is that we have been able to take this protocol and use it across multiple systems. So especially when you're a youth going from maybe like the juvenile courts to child welfare or different resources that you're using or different social services. Not everyone's using the same terms and not everyone's comfortable. Not everyone knows like your pronouns, and it's all just a very different, like, you would wish that it was better streamlined, but it's not. And I think what I've seen from equality is having, when you implement that protocol to multiple different systems or organizations, then you're seeing that across the board. And you're getting the same education. And before, in the past, at least when I was in care, it was always just something that you only came to once it came to you. So it was, once that hurdle was there, oh, I have a youth who is transgender and I don't know how to handle it and I don't know what to do and their situation, I don't know, like all these questions. And then you hit a wall and then you don't know what to do until you hit that wall. And that could lead further to some harm to the youth. And then we're talking about trauma. And so I think right now, what I've seen is CCYJ is literally giving you this curriculum to implement the protocol that gets ahead of the game before we're getting to that wall.
yeah, yeah. And I totally agree with you. And the other thing I would add to that is not only are you getting a curriculum, but you're getting fabulous trainers like Minnie to come and like talk about that, right? Because I think like I know, both you and I, we share an experience of being in care and being impacted by our LGBTQ plus identities in care. But it's like we're passionate about this for a reason, right? Like stuff happened to us and we're like truly getting up there to like talk about these things because we don't want it to happen again.
Right.
And I think like really when we're talking about like especially the protocol for safe and affirming care, it's a prevention, right? Like it's this preventative way that the system can actually respond to young people um, in a way that really does harm reduce like that trauma that we
Mhm.
end up going through being involved in the system. Not that it gets rid of all of it, right? Because we're whole people and there's a lot of other trauma that's not related to our sexual orientation or our gender identity.
Right.
But yeah, but like I mean it's definitely a helpful tool to like at least make people be nice to you
Mhm.
while you're going through the system.
Right.
So I'm wondering, what do you feel like how has it actually, speaking of this like co-trainer bit, like what is it like being a co-trainer with CCYJ?
So at first I started out as just being like a panelist, speaking from experience and just using like a little like 15-20 minute segment in the training to speak on that. And then it headed me into being a co-trainer. And that was a different view because I even learned more about myself. And so it was also had some personal growth in it. And it was really awesome. I Although I was very, very shocked. I was very shocked at how much people didn't know. And um, for me, I guess it was more like not like second nature, but just like it's one of those things that like if you know music, you just know music. Like it's not really easy to teach someone.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, so it was kind of like that. Like, wait, how do you not know that? Do you talk to people? Do you ask questions? Do you have these conversations? And then you start realizing people don't even have those conversations. Some of it is secret. And even talking to some of the other trainers, we notice that when people say specific words like lesbian, they like whisper it and they like whisper gay and lesbian, and it's kind of funny. And I was just kind of shocked by that, but it gave me more motivation to want to teach these things, because I was realizing it's not that they didn't want to, that just those things, those conversations weren't being had in their work, and it was surprising.
Which is like really wild to me because like I feel like social workers have the ability to have the hardest conversations, right? Like we
Mm.
are having the hardest conversations about the most formative experiences in our life, and like they do that. But it's just like because they don't necessarily have the language, it becomes like this barrier. Now all of a sudden we can't talk about like this taboo subject just because it's not practiced, right? Like it's not talked about. And it's just like, I don't know, I feel like having the training space, like you're actually given an opportunity to practice. And I'm wondering, like, in those moments, like what has been, something that you've really taken from those spaces when people are actually able to practice? Like, have there been any great success stories? Are there anything that you like remember um that you want to share about those kinds of experiences?
Yeah, so I'm not really seeing so much of what folks are taking away and what they're actually implementing, but I know that at the end of our meetings, I do have people say, "Oh, I have this specific situation," and they share what's going on with them or with someone that they're providing services to. And I have them, when we teach them or we help them through that at the end, I love when they say, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take that to my work. And, or these are things we're going to change in our organization tomorrow. Like we're going to change our bathroom signs. We're going to put up some pride flags. Like it's so cool to see that. And they're so excited about it. Like that is the funnest part for me.
I love that so much. Yeah, I just love that so much. It's like the enthusiasm of like, I've discovered I have the power to make this safe. Like, it's
Right.
so great. It's so great to see people feel really motivated to like, and it just shows that they really care about their clients, right? Like they're like, oh, I want to make this change. Like I really care about my clients, and I'll do that to make that change. And
Yeah.
I definitely think that that's something that I always think of as a big success. It's like when people walk away passionate about
Yeah.
serving young people in these systems. Um, so relatedly, like what equality resources and supports would have been most helpful to you when you were in foster care? And why? Because I feel like a lot of our job is we're like, here are these resources, here are these things that like you all can be doing now. But it's like we went through foster care. Like what, in your opinion, like what would have been helpful when you were in care?
Right. That question's
Mhm.
always so hard.
I know.
But
I
I,
know.
I think so. When I was in care, I didn't really come out because I was scared too. I didn't really have that safe and affirming person. Even my social worker kind of scared me. So I and like I said, I was in kind of survival mode from like 12 to 19. So my identity was kind of on the back burner. So I was kind of late to that. And then I I let me think. So I think the best is, because I was in that survival mode, if someone did give me like a brochure or a pamphlet to some resource, like, hey, we have this LGBTQ plus youth club that meets every Thursday. Here's this pamphlet. I am not the person that's going to do anything with that pamphlet. It's going to be in my bag for the rest of the year, and then I'm going to throw it away with all my other school stuff. I feel like I would have needed someone to keep up with that. Maybe like if they were really concerned and like trying to support that around me, it would have been like an every week conversation or once a month, or even something of like sending those emails for me or making those calls for me, because I was not the type of youth that was going to do that for myself.
Mhm.
There's definitely a line there that can be crossed, but I think I did come out to at least enough uh, adults, I guess, adults in my life that I feel like that could have been done, but it wasn't.
Yeah, that's like so real. That's so real. I really appreciate you talking a lot about like that like yeah, like I was busy surviving. Like what was my day to day, right? Like what were those resources that I needed? Like hindsight is 2020, but when you're in the moment, you really need that worker to step up.
Hmm.
And I really, really appreciate you articulating that and you know, mentioning that because that's just so real. Like I really relate to that in my own personal experience as well. And I too had a social worker that I didn't come out to, and I too also had a placement that was not safe for me to come out as well. And so, I mean, yeah, I think, you know, that's so real. The piece about like, one, where is that consistent person who's maybe making the call for me? And two, like, where's also that recognition that like I'm struggling and I need support, right?
Yeah, right. And it could be a time and place thing too, especially when you first enter care. It
Mhm.
kind of feels like you're meeting adult after adult and
Yeah.
services after services. And it all just, it's overwhelming, it's chaotic, and it all just meshes together. So you have this assumption as a youth that your social worker is communicating with your foster parent or um, what are the case, the house living program.
Oh, the independent living services?
Yes, yes,
Oh
and then
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so you're under the assumption that they're all communicating together and they all no, it's
Oh no, yeah, yeah, yeah.
so you assume that your social worker is the same as your independent case living manager, and that's the same as your CASA, and that's the same. Like you just think, I don't know, you don't realize that these are all different people working for different programs. So I think it would have been better to have more of like a time and place type of discussion that wasn't just thrown in there with all this other paperwork and all these other services.
Yeah, and just like to be clear too, like that's I think what we really try to emphasize with equality as well is like really standardizing like it's important to really talk about like, you know, a person's SOGI, a sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And like the expectation is that there's so many other things that get lost in the mix that we can't lose a very significant piece of who a young person is as like all of these things are coming at them,
Right.
right? And that, you know, that I think is just like it's so real. Like the like the loss in communications piece is just like so real. And then like you feel really pushed along in the system and then you're like, wow, like this system is supposed to be like impacting my health and wellness, but it's like, is this actually making me healthy and like weller, or am I just like kind of pushed along, right? Um, so again, really appreciate you you highlighting that. So I guess like kind of the last thing I wanted to talk with you about is, you know, do you have thoughts on how we can better support LGBTQ youth in systems of care? You know, most of the folks who are going to be watching this video are not social workers or foster parents. Like this is not like their day-to-day world. And so I guess like, you know, what is one call to action that you feel they can do to make positive impact?
I think the biggest thing for positive impact, um, I think it's more about reflection on yourself.
Mhm.
So building that knowledge and doing your research, as well as asking yourself, why do I want to know this, and why am I curious about this youth or young adult in my life? Once you can answer that, then I think you can go forth with that. There's a lot of folks in my life or in my past that strictly or just really wanted to know my orientation just based off their own curiosity, and they just really wanted to appease that, but didn't realize how harmful that would have been for me to come out at that time, and I wasn't ready. But when they were prying and prying and prying, and you're a kid who's just trying to figure it out. Like, I think that is the biggest thing is self-reflection, and holding yourself accountable to have the knowledge and to have the understanding, so you can then reflect that and then help create that safe and affirming space.
Yeah, that's so real. That's so real, Minnie. Thank you so much for saying that. And, I think some other actionable items that, folks can do is like if you really feel drawn to a cause, donate to that cause, like donate to the people who are on the ground doing that work. And, you know, it, and also like don't limit your exposure. Like, go to those public events that, LGBTQ folks like offer to the community. Like, get to know someone in your life who is LGBTQ plus. Like, try to, empathize with their struggle, right? And especially with the intersection of like LGBTQ youth and experiencing systems of care, like step up, be a mentor, right? Like look for volunteer opportunities, donate to those causes, and really try to be a positive impact in that young person's life.
Right.
Because those are all things I feel like it goes back to just like being a good human, but like it especially goes back to like, oh, I care about this population, I care about the struggle. And so it's like, yeah, like, okay, so like walk the walk,
Okay, then what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like walk the walk.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the beautiful, at least that's one of the beautiful things I've seen with like a lot of our partners is that they really are walking the walk and they really are committed to the young people in their communities, which is
Yeah.
just so beautiful to see.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's hard seeing people that share like about Pride Month or they share those rainbow flags, but like, hey, how about like throwing some resources or link something or like steer someone the right way and actually help support, but don't like just try to build your clout by sharing a rainbow on your page.
Right, yeah, and then also, like, like, think about if you're, like, with an economic mindset, like, where are queer businesses? Like,
Mhm.
what are queer activities or LGBTQ related activities that are happening in your community that you can get involved in, right? Like, how are you really, like, looking at the community as a whole versus, like, here are my pronouns or here's this pride flag? Like,
Mhm.
actually having pride, like that's an act of like defying what society says we can do, and the best thing you can do as an ally is like support our pride, right? um Especially for like vulnerable young people in these systems of care.
Yeah,
It's important.
totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, I had someone at work once, I think it was like June 1st or June 2nd, someone at work who knew that I was out came up to me and was like, "Oh, I've been trying to find you. I want to tell you happy Pride." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." Yeah. Again, yeah, it felt nice that they were like actively like, "Oh, I need to talk to Minnie." Like, it just felt good.
I love that. Well, Minnie, thank you so much for your wonderful time. Happy Pride. And I just want to say, like, I always appreciate speaking with you. I really think that you bring it home. And I just really appreciate the amazing advocate and person you are. And so grateful that you choose to partner with EQ because we love you, Minnie.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. And I'm so happy to work with you all.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.